Good afternoon. My name is Kaylee Smith, and this presentation will be over learning inclusivity through the creation of infographics over disabilities. So everything I learned this semester was with both Dr. Mardell Atkins and Professor Audrey Petty. And most infographics, you can see them throughout all education levels. However, they're normally only used as supplements, but in some classes, specifically in the sciences, they're the only ways that you can see what's happening at a molecular level. And with both professors, I have actually gone through and made this presentation to discuss and show viewers an insight into 5 of the most common learning disabilities in the classroom. So the 5 of them that I'm going to be talking about today are dyslexia, ADHD, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, and a visual processing deficit known as visual sequencing. Dyslexia is something you've all probably heard about before, and you might know people with it. It's one of the most common ones, as well as ADHD. And it is a loss of association between words and sounds. Letters can be confused for one another, and reading does not match overall intelligence, as well as the fact that I must emphasize this, dyslexia does not affect the individual's general intelligence either. It's just an issue when it comes to re-articulating something. So in this animation, I'm showing you through the eyes of a kindergartner, beginning with one who can see the board regularly, and then a student that has dyslexia. So to get a closer look at it, the yellow boxes are showing what is known as common letter flipping, which is what are the most media-wide portrayed, which is the flipping of letters, or sometimes it's kind of like a scramble game. And the pink and magenta boxes are actually more uncommon, and it involves them replacing an entire word with something that they do know, not because of the fact that they do it automatically, it's because they might not know how to pronounce the new word, or they just want to save themselves from the embarrassment in front of their peers about the fact that they don't know what that word is. And one of the easiest ways to go through and help a student with this is actually using multi-sensory learning. And in the example I'm providing you with the animation on the right is through using magnetic letters to go through and spell out words. The combination of the physical movement of them moving the letters with the cognitive aspect of the lesson, it allows for better retention. Excuse me. And this retention is much like if you were to try and learn how to play a sport, it's easier for you to go out and play the sport to learn it rather than sitting at home watching someone else play it. So ADHD is the other one of the most common ones. However, you probably only know about the hyperactive or impulsive symptoms, which are normally portrayed as talking a lot, interrupting conversations, activities, or even taking someone else's stuff. And it also can be seen as them constantly fidgeting or playing with their hands. However, some of the inattentive symptoms, which are also very common, just not easily portrayed, involves the student daydreaming a lot more often, and that can lead to them having issues with following directions. They might lead to issues with organizing tasks and controlling where they put their stuff, causing a messy room, and that can lead to them failing to finish tasks overall. So the look on the left is an outward perspective. It's easier to go through and portray it this way. The student on the left is constantly moving his hands, messing with the Legos they're using for the lesson that day, and talking and taking away the teacher's attention. However, what you haven't noticed, probably because of the fact that there's a speech bubble on one side and not on the other, the student on the right is actually falling asleep to go daydream. So it's showing you both sides of the spectrum. One of them is getting a lot of stimuli, therefore reacting to it, whereas the other student isn't receiving as much and is going inward to give his own stimulation through a daydream or thinking about other things that day. To further prove that, through the eyes of the inattentive symptoms, you can see the animation to the right where it gets fuzzy. It could be that they're daydreaming, but it also could be that there's just a noise in the classroom that they're being distracted by, like the humming of a projector if you're showing a video. So one of the things that I've learned about recently when it came to how to be more inclusive to students with ADHD is something that is more common now in kindergarten classes. It's known as flexible seating, and it could be as simple as using yoga balls or having the students have a standing desk, but it lets them kind of fidget and get their energy out so that whenever you start the lesson, you can go through and get all their attention in. The other thing that the teacher could do during the class is actually have their schedule for the day color-coded and match what the students will have their notes with, so that they'll be able to go through and switch mindsets when they see a specific color when it comes to the lesson. So dyscalculia is one of the lesser known, and it's actually an issue with discerning mathematical equations and abstract math concepts. It is rather hard to portray, but I've gone through and chosen one of the main symptoms, which is whenever they have an issue understanding a concept like a number means the same thing as the word. So in this case, we're going to be using the number 5. So in this scenario, it's going to be 2 children trying to go through and draw out 5 chickens. And I've gone through and shown both of them because if it's the number 5, the student will know how many to draw. However, if it's the word 5, they might not be able to do so. That's why guessing in this animation. The other thing, so how do you can use things as simple as a math graphic organizer, which causes the student to have to write down the equation or word problem, write down what it's asking for them, and then go step by step through the problem. And if there is an area where they're messing up or don't understand, you as the parent or the teacher can go through and see where they're messing up and then help them by correcting it. That being said, another thing you as a teacher can do is actually have a word problem example and show step by step how you broke down to figure out where to go in the problem, as well as an equation where you go step by step to show them every single thing they need to do to get to the answer. Another thing you can do, these students typically will have issues when giving money or change. So adding in like the actual coins for that test or practice test would actually help them better with the fact that they have the physical coins in hand and they're not just going by an image on a paper. You can also go through and have things like times tables more often around the classroom so that you can constantly have the student refer back to them. Dysgraphia is also rather uncommon, but it's typically only noticed once you get past the years of learning how to write that there might be a problem. Because dysgraphia causes the student to not be able to read their handwriting due to the fact that they have issues with organizing their thoughts onto paper, and they don't often know how to put the correct pressure, hold, or even how to hold a writing tool correctly, which can cause them to have issues with forming letters, spacing out words, and just writing in a straight line in general. There'll also be a very distinct difference in their learning capabilities when they're learning something that's spoken to them versus what they've learned written-wise. So in the animation currently that you see, it goes from something that's pretty crisp and clear, what you would expect of someone probably in like the 5th grade to be able to write out properly, to this scribbled kind of just mess is the worst, the easiest word to use to describe it. But what I must emphasize is what I've put at the very end of this is probably a moderate or mild case of dysgraphia. It can be much worse than what I've shown you today. So the inclusivity part in this case is actually pretty simple. The student himself will have to go through and be in writing intensive therapy probably, but as an educator or parent, one of the things that you can do is they have different types of pencil grips you can use to help your student better hold a pencil. But you can also go through as a teacher, write out your notes or lesson plans to where most of them are typed down for the student so they can pay attention more so audibly while you give out your presentation so that they can minimize the amount of writing intensive type notes they need to do. But also would help if they're higher up education-wise and they're still having issues with this, if you're able to record your lesson for the day so they can go back and watch it over whenever they're at home so they can try and take their time, or providing more time in class for them to take notes would also help them try and slow down rather than rush to try and write something and then not be able to read it later. So finally, today I'm going to be talking about the visual processing deficit, known as visual sequencing. And this issue involves difficulty in seeing shapes or letters or words in sometimes the correct order. And if they're trying to read something aloud, they may end up skipping lines or reading the same line over and over again in class. So if you focus on the letter 7, or number 7, pardon me, you'll go through and it'll take a second for you to realize that everything else is kind of going out of focus. And what you probably haven't noticed is that several of the letters have actually gone through and altered themselves into something different. They aren't in the correct order in the numbers around them. And this is actually from someone that I do know that is diagnosed with a visual sequencing processing deficit. They said that this is probably the most accurate thing that they've seen when it comes to what they see when they're trying to jump between both their test and an answer sheet. So the last way to be inclusive towards visual sequencing is when you go through a lesson, make sure that when you go through directions, you read them aloud and provide oral instruction. Or if you do need to write it down on the board or on the projection, use color coordination. Even if it's just 2 colors, switching between the 2, it will allow them to break the sentences apart and see that there's an order of them. And to give a further example is actually through the animation I've been working on with Dr. Mardell Atkins over mitosis. Everything in it is color coordinated and it's specific to each animation. This actually has been, when I asked them, they said this looked like it was really well done and kept inclusivity in mind to them. But to finish off today, everything I've said today shouldn't be used as a self-diagnosis tool to any state of mind. Everything I do is just because I really like learning about different things in science and psychology, and I'm able to draw pretty decently. And if you think that you or someone you might know might have a processing deficit or have a learning disability at any age, have a professional go through and do it. But that being said, I hope that you all have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of the presentations.